Hatchetations, the uninvited visits by the hatchet-wielding saloon smasher, Carrie Nation. "Go to Kiowa," the voice instructed. "I'll stand by you." The recipient of this command knew exactly what she was being told to do. Head to the saloons in nearby Kiowa, Kansas, and spray the vile hellholes with broken glass and smashed booze. And she knew exactly who told her to do this: God. "I did not hear these words as other words," Carrie Nation later told an interviewer. "There was no voice, but they seemed to be spoken in my heart." She immediately sprang from her bed and set about putting God's will into action. "I got a box that would fit under my buggy seat," she said, "and every time I thought no one would see me, I went out in the front yard to pick up some brickbats." As Carrie gathered the brick fragments that 1900 June day, she wrapped them in newspaper and tucked them into the box. During the day of her godly instruction, she cooked enough food to keep her husband David fed for the next couple days. She told him she planned to stay overnight with her friend Mrs. Springer. Since Carrie had occasionally done this before, he wasn't suspicious of her actions. That afternoon she headed out. "I hitched up my horse to the buggy," she noted, "and put the box of smashers in." Since she often pulled into Mrs. Springer's yard during rides, she thought her horse, Prince, might turn in without her prompting. So she gave him the reins. If he turned in, she decided, I would stay all night. If not, I would go on to Kiowa. Prince, according to her recollections, not only trotted past her friend's driveway, but seemed to increase his speed. I knew, Carrie deduced, that it was God's will to go on. That evening she stayed in Kiowa with a friend and prayed throughout most of the night to steel her nerves for the next day's bar bashing. "Men, I have come to save you from a drunkard's fate," she blared the next morning as she burst into Dobson's saloon. Dobson and another man gaped from behind the counter. "Get out of the way," Carrie yelled. "I don't want to strike you, but I'm going to break up this den of vice." With that, she commenced the saving process by targeting rows of liquor bottles. When her bombardment was completed, she strode through the broken glass and hustled down the street to give 2 more Kiowa saloons the Carrie Nation treatment. In the 3rd saloon, she decided to add the glass of the ornate mirror behind the bar to the pile of liquor bottle shards. The brickbat she hurled, though, didn't do the trick. Undaunted, Carrie spotted a single ball on the nearby billiard table. "I said, 'Thank you, God,'" she later recollected, and picked it up and threw it. The eyes of the astonished bartender and his customers likely widened to near billiard ball size as they witnessed the ivory missile smashing its target and showering the room with broken glass. The siege of Carrie Nation had begun. The spark that kindled that raging siege was ignited years before by her first husband, Dr. Charles Gloyd. She first met him when her parents took him in as a boarder in their Cass County, Missouri home. Not only was the handsome young man a medical doctor, but he held young Carrie in awe of his intelligent conversation and his ability to speak several languages. Despite her strict upbringing, Carrie found herself attracted to him. Then came the shocker. "He astonished me one evening by kissing me," she reflected. "I had never had a gentleman to take such a privilege and felt shocked. I threw up my hands to my face, saying several times, 'I am ruined.'" Ruined or not, Carrie slowly began to return his affections. When I learned that Dr. Gloyd loved me, she confessed, I began to love him. Her parents, however, did not share her affections for the good doctor. They had been noticing his frequent drinking bouts and realized he had a severe problem with alcohol. Carrie's mother forbade her to be alone with him, but Carrie found a way to covertly communicate with him. He had introduced her to Shakespeare and left a volume on his table. In the morning at breakfast, Carrie recalled, he would manage to call the name Shakespeare. Then I knew there was a letter for me in its leaves. Eventually, her parents accepted the pairing, but continued to worry. Their concern, sadly, was warranted. Gloyd was drunk at the wedding and drew few sober breaths afterward. Carrie routinely had to tell his patients he wasn't available to answer their emergency calls. Less than a year after their marriage, and shortly before their daughter Charlene was born, they separated. The next year, 1869, Gloyd's cause of death was listed as delirium tremens, or from pneumonia compounded by excessive drinking. Not only did the wrecked marriage scar Carrie emotionally, but Charlene developed a number of physical and emotional concerns, which Carrie attributed to alcohol. The ingredient in Carrie's personality that might have led to the seemingly excessive nature of her later reaction flowed through her family's bloodlines. Her grandmother on her mother's side reportedly needed to be kept behind bars in her later years due to extreme behavior. Following this colorful family tradition, Carrie's mother, Mary, not only began to dress like England's Queen Victoria, but, according to accounts, often believed she was the Queen. She strolled around in a purple velvet robe, sporting a gold-colored crown adorned with a large chunk of colored glass. When she rode in a carriage, she forced a servant to don a red coat and gallop ahead, announcing her presence with a brass trumpet. Not unpredictably, she spent her final years in a mental hospital, or lunatic asylum, as they were then known. Carrie's bottle breaking in Kiowa just whetted her appetite for more of the same. Her second husband, David Nation, whom she had told she was just visiting a neighbor, didn't seem particularly upset about her behavior. In fact, when he learned about her brickbat and rock-throwing incidents, he lightheartedly suggested she should use a hatchet the next time to cause more damage. "That's the most sensible thing you have said since I married you," she responded. With that, her modus operandi switched to smashing and bashing during what she would call her hatchetations. Carrie rampaged through Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma like a cyclone. She would line up a speech, usually at a local church, and stir many of the congregation into a prohibitionist frenzy. Later, she would lead a group into the bars, which she often referred to as murder shops, singing hymns and sometimes joining in the hatcheting. Saloons across the Midwest soon displayed signs reading, "All nations welcome but Carrie." One journalist described her as a 6-foot-tall stevedore with the face of a prison warden and the persistence of a toothache. Carrie laid down her hatchet after a couple years of smashing and 23 visits to local jails. She changed the spelling of her name to Carry Nation to let folks know she intended to carry a nation from the darkness of drunken bestiality into the light of purity and sobriety. She gave hundreds of prohibitionist speeches and for a while lectured on the vaudeville circuit, often reenacting her notorious bar-bashing scenes. "I want to do what God tells me to do," she told a judge after one of her hatchetations. "I am commanded," she explained, "to cry aloud about sin and not to whisper about it." And as history has recorded, Carrie Nation was never once accused of whispering.